Hi, my name is April Foster, and this is the Lord's Army Lesson 2. We'll start this week with a word of prayer, go into our memory work and Bible facts, then we'll go into our lesson and end with an activity. This week is packed with activities, so it'll be cram-packed on time. So this week, if you want to, for your memory work and Bible facts, I would suggest doing the memory verse, which is Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 and 5. And start with that and then go straight into the lesson. We talk about how God wanted the people to love him with their whole hearts. He didn't want people to pretend to love him. He wanted them to actually love him, and he's going to make a covenant with them. So throughout this material, I'll have different definition sheets, and it'll usually have a big word at the top and then some icons and images to help the kids make associations in their mind with what this word is. So a covenant is an agreement between people about how they will act towards each other. And it's really important that each one of them starts memorizing this definition. So I usually show the definition, and then I'll go around to each child, hold it in front of them, and say, what is a covenant? And they'll say a covenant is an agreement between people about how they should act, or how they will act towards each other. And they'll go to the next kid and have them say it repeat until it's fully ingrained in their mind. All right, so that is a covenant. And we talk about, especially with the older kids, although we did with the younger this on Sunday, talk about like a man and a woman making a covenant with one another, maybe reference their parents have made a covenant to one to another, and then different instances where people would make covenants with one another, and that's all in your lesson narrative. And okay, so then we go into the passage Deuteronomy 29, 1 through 13. So the way this is structured is that there's an activity throughout the lesson. So you have all these bingo cards, and each one has a different arrangement of the icons on them. Give one to each child, and then you can laminate and let them use a dry erase marker on them, or you can use coins or little tokens, whatever you wish to do to mark the spaces. But what they're supposed to do is first, I lay them out and have them look at their board. And we make sure that all the words on their board, they know what they are, what the pictures are, and what the words mean. And that in and of itself takes a few minutes to do, especially with the younger kids, because they probably don't know what prolong means. And we'll say, oh, remember last week we talked about that means to stay a long time, prolong. And what does prosper mean? And we'll, define those words as it goes along, or at least tell them what it's the opposite of. So you'll go through that and make sure they hear those words. Then part of your definition or part of your icons on your bingo card will be King Og and King Sihon. And so you have this visual if you want to remind them, since they're just little pictures on your bingo cards. All right, and then you can also remind them, who they were kings of and what land, if you want to bring that in. You have that visual if you choose to use it. All right, so then you'll read the passage, and as you read, you're going to stop at each word and let them mark it off their bingo card. So these are the words of the covenant, and they're going to mark off the word covenant, which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, besides the covenant he made with them in Horeb. Okay, Horeb, let's check that off of our bingo card. On this one, it's right here in the top, and we'll remind them Horeb is the same as Sinai. All right, so you're going to get through that passage, and then at the end, just ask if anybody has a bingo. I generally don't like them to call out bingo because it's distracting, but we'll say, hey, when we get to the end, we'll see who has a bingo. And then from there, in your narrative, you have some different questions you can ask, and you can check for their understanding and how well they were listening as you were playing this bingo game. Then you're going to switch to erase the boards, and you'll switch to Deuteronomy 30, verses 11 through 20. And you have that passage also in your lesson narrative. And you'll do the same thing again. You don't have to repeat. They've already seen the pictures, so you don't have to repeat that again, but you'll let them mark off, and then at the end of the reading, see who has bingo. All right, so that is the first section. And also, I should have mentioned that this was a covenant between the people and God, and so this is the image you'll use for that to describe covenant. And then you get to part of this covenant was God was going to make they were going to have a special ceremony. And so the special ceremony would take place at Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And you'll point, so Mount Gerizim is this one here on the map that is very fertile and lush, and Mount Ebal is rocky and barren. Now, this isn't exactly how they look in real life. I kind of exaggerated it in the imagery here. And so first you'll say, okay, this is Mount Gerizim and this is Mount Ebal. They're really more like big hills. They're not like tall mountains. But what do you notice about the difference between the two? And right away, even the youngest kids were like, oh, this one is rocky and this one is green, you know? And you're like, you're right. So Mount Gerizim, and you'll talk about how it represented God and him caring for the people, and that's the blessing, and how Mount Ebal was known for being rocky and barren and not having a lot of life on it, and that is representative of being disconnected from God or disobedience and having the consequences of disobedience. All right, so the people were supposed to stand on either side. Half of them were supposed to go to Mount Gerizim and half to Mount Ebal and stand on either side, and then the Levites were going to read the blessings and cursings. So they started with cursings, and so in these you have little images of different cursings. Now there's lots of cursings, but we chose 4 that could be easily pictured in an image. So the first one is, cursed is the one who makes a carved or molded image. So you'll start by saying, okay, what do you see in this picture here? What's this man doing? Okay, he's making an image, he's making an idol. So cursed is the man who does that. It's an abomination. You'll read from the passage, and you have that copied in your lesson narrative if you want to use that, or you can read it straight from your own version of the Bible. I should mention everything that is in the lesson narrative is always in the New King James Version. So if that makes it easier on you, sometimes I personally use the ESV, so it's easier for me to use the lesson narrative so that we're all speaking the same words that are like in their lesson book and whatnot, and while we're in class. All right. Then you go down the list of the different cursings. And after they would say a cursing, the people would say amen. So after the Levites would read a cursing, the people would say amen. And that just means they agree with it. And then that's the way it should be. Cursed is the one. Yes, that's the way it should be. All right, so after the cursings the Levites announced the blessings. And so you'll talk about what these different pictures represent, and that the people would prosper and be fertile, and their livestock would have lots of food to eat. They would be very wealthy, and that would be what would happen if they prospered. And then at the last, you have, if you would like to use it, you have an image of actually how Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim look like in present day. Of course, there's a lot of houses on it, so I chose not to use this picture for the for the actual visuals for class, but this is what they look like. And there's a valley in between them. It's kind of just 2 little hills. All right, so that is your lesson narrative. And like I said, it is packed already. And then at the end, if you have time for any activities, you have your map that you can label and place Sihon and Og on the map. So I usually just cut these apart so that they can just go snip, and we're not spending a lot of time cutting in class, because that can be a very long activity with 4-year-olds. And I like to spend more time in the Word and less time in the crafts. The other activity is this activity. So you have a page with the passage of Deuteronomy 29 that we've already read in class, and a bunch of the pictures, the same pictures you've seen on your bingo card. And then you also have this different location. Now, this isn't a map, it's just different locations. So you have Egypt, the wilderness, and Israel. These are actual pictures of these places, which the kids generally like. And you're gonna cut these out and say where these different events took place. Did they take place in Egypt? Did they take place in the wilderness? Or did they take place in Israel? And you're gonna cut them out and place them where it happened on your places worksheet. And that is lesson number 2. Like I said, very packed. Hope you can fit it all in.